To explore the overlap between psychedelic realms, astral projection, deep meditative states, and the human soul, this is Neon Galactic, a podcast produced by PBS affiliate Key TV in Northern California. I'm your host, James Falk. Thanks for joining us. Technologies have existed for thousands of years that purport to launch human awareness into transcendental realms and allow for visionary experience. It's a deeply rooted human tradition dating back to the days of animistic shamanism and ancient tribal communities, one that until recently was largely rejected by modern medical and scientific authorities. That does now seem to be changing as more and more people discover the power of these mechanisms to reconnect us to nature and to our deeper selves. Psychedelics like DMT and psilocybin are such technologies, as is the gateway process and its binaural beats made famous by the Monroe Institute. Deep meditative experiences are another route, perhaps a bit slower, to these profoundly connective and magical experiences. As we've discovered on this show, NHI contact and near-death experiences can also unveil deep and quite profound levels of human consciousness, leaving percipients transformed and awakened to vastly expanded human potentials. All of these phenomena point to a reality much more organic, complex, and mysterious than we've come to believe in our modern materialist culture. And it's this realization that I now think represents the best hope humanity has for surviving and thriving in this coming age of crisis. Our guest today, author and psychonaut Adam Butler, who wrote Butler's DMT Field Guide, link in the description, has become an advocate for the exploration of these realms and the power they have to reinvent our species. DMT, he says, helped save his life, and further experimentation at the Monroe Center and elsewhere has proven to him that the use of psychedelics is just one method among several to make transcendental contact. We'll discuss his life, his book, and the lessons he's drawn from his adventures about the nature of consciousness, humanity, and the universe more broadly. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me. That was awesome. That's all the stuff I want to talk about.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I've dived into your book. I've read the magazine articles you sent me, and I find it amazing how there's so many parallels between, so many people that are on this kind of journey beyond self, whether it's, like deeply sort of meditative spiritual work or through psychedelics, through the Monroe Institute Gateway process. They all seem to be trending to the same place. I'm intrigued by the statement that you made that DMT helped save your life, and I'm hoping that you can sort of contextualize that statement and explain how you first encountered DMT and began this journey.
Sure. Uh, I think like most people that get into psychedelics, they're looking for a shakeup or a change. And in my particular case, I needed one pretty badly. Um, I mentioned how it saved my life because honestly, I was in a suicidal funk. I was heavily depressed and anxious. And I go over the details in my book and I go over them kind of briefly, but I hit the data points because I feel like at my age, at 44 years old, my story isn't necessarily unique or special. We're all going to have our bullshit and drama. We're all going to have our past. But I mentioned mine in particular because my destruction was because of all of my own making. I had no one to blame but myself. If anything, just the opposite. I had every possible advantage growing up from, amazing parents, great grandparents, college educated. I was gifted a large sum of money. I had everything on paper, but at 40 years old, I had that proverbial midlife crisis where over a series of about 2 years, everything in my life completely collapsed. And it forced me to really do the deep inner work. And I tried several other methods. And honestly, until shrooms and in particular DMT were brought into my life, that I finally have the ability to have the inner vision or reflective work that I needed to have. And I think like most people, uh, DMT will fall into your lap when the universe kind of thinks you need it, and that's exactly what happened to me. So,
Yeah.
I can get into that first day, how I was exposed to it, or more of what led to that day. However, path you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, addiction is a part of my story. I was a heroin addict, homeless at one point, and part of this show has been what's evolved out of my own struggle with addiction and opiates. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then maybe get into how the DMT helped you kind of get out of that?
Sure. And I share my authentic and raw story because I think it resonates. And in my particular case, everything in my life burnt down to the ground. So I have nothing that anybody can take from me, or there's nothing embarrassing that I haven't already shared or exposed to the world. So I had I think like a lot of people, I was running from my issues by masking it in alcohol. And not to say that that was the main driver, but that was a real block to me being able to see myself. So the first thing that really set off this path was I got a knock on the door by a constable getting a restraining order against me. And this was with a woman that I had been with for almost 8 years. We had this beautiful three-story Victorian by the water. Um, I was making close to 200 grand a year. I was, the fancy cars, the vacations, all of those things. But I was belligerent. I was a drunk, narcissistic asshole. And I'm preface this, not that this makes it any better, but I've never laid my hand on anybody. I've never been in a fight in my life. But I was accused of basically mentally and verbally and spatially abusing her. And, unfortunately, in hindsight, that's exactly what I was doing, not only to her, but to everybody in my life that I was, that was trying to love and help me. And so that day, I got the knock on the door, and he was like, "Yeah, you need to leave and leave the house now." And I was just like, what the fuck is this? Like, what are you handing me? And quickly read through it, and the shock of what really was happening was I needed to vacate my house immediately, and I had no time to really process it or grab anything. He gave me a couple minutes to take, the essentials, and uh, I left, went to my parents' house, and that was right before COVID, really, or just when COVID kicked in. So this process that was just supposed to take a couple of weeks to pan out ended up taking over a year, and it was just this horrible, lengthy process of, what just happened, but I was still throwing blame at her and at everybody else, but I was still, working my high paying job and still drinking. So I just kind of kept rolling with it. But then, long story short, I got into another relationship that blew up because of the same issues. I quit my high paying job, moved out to the Cape, and got an even better job, making even more money. It was the dream job. But I had a conflict with a gentleman that worked there who, I thought screwed me over $900. And at that point in my life, $900 was nothing, but I was just so short with everything that just happened that I threatened to kill him. And we got into this huge conflict. And, and I don't say all these things lightly about suicide and threatening to kill people. I was a walking dark person. And
Yeah, no.
luckily the owner was there, and he, stopped us from really getting physical, but he lived, that gentleman. And I say gentlemen now, if any of these women, or if this person were put in front of me, I owe them all an apology, and I would ask for their forgiveness for the way I, projected myself upon them. But he lived just a couple blocks from me, and I knew that it wasn't just gonna end. So that was on a Sunday that we had that major blowout, and that Monday morning I left and I said, I'm driving to California to hug a redwood tree, and that was my only plan. And I drove 26 hours. I got to Kansas City, Missouri. I, stayed there for a night or two, and then ironically, that's how I ended up going to Eureka, California. Which is
Eureka, California.
set up Arcata, Trinidad, all that area. So yeah,
Which
I
is
took
where
a
I'm at right now.
year and a half and did this spiritual kind of journey where I used psychedelics the entire time. But I had, like I said, over the course of a 2-year period, lost 2 long-term relationships, 2 jobs, threatened to kill a man, and I mentioned before recording that I'm 4+ years sober. So that's when all this shit started happening too, where I really realized that I needed to quit the alcohol. And then the clarity of mind that came with that, combined with shrooms for several months to feel comfortable in the psychedelic space, then led me to DMT. And that was the day that really changed and saved my life, because I had a complete perspective shift on reality, what I was, who I was, and not that it fixed anything. And I want to, preface it where psychedelics and DMT is definitely not a magic pill. Psychedelics aren't necessarily for everybody. You still have to do the inner work. And in my case, it just shined the spotlight on all of my bullshit and all of the things that I needed to correct. But it was all of my internal stuff. It wasn't a woman or a guy or a job or anything external to me. All of the stuff that was wrong in my life was because of me. And that was the first time I was able to have that type of realization. And that was what stopped me from banging my head against the wall and running from all of my demons and issues. And that's where the shadow work and the inner work comes in. But that's what led me to that fateful day where I really blasted pretty deep with DMT. And now that's been several years now. I've done DMT hundreds of times. I've done, shrooms, countless times. And it's allowed me to live a life that is content, happy, connected, and full of love and empathy and amazing relationships, where before all of those things were just the opposite. And ultimately that's the message I want to share. And there's plenty of sensational stories and psychedelic conversations we can have, but it's really about the mental health aspect of it that I want to ideally share.
Yeah. It's interesting. In my life, I've taken psychedelics before, and each time that I've done it, they form like markers, almost like chapter breaks in my life, where like I have an experience, and then it forces you, and usually it's on coming out of the experience, because I've never really had a really deep transformative, like relocative kind of experience, but it forces me at least to analyze my life, and I can see it more objectively in those moments than I ever can any other time. And for somehow coming out of those experiences, I'm motivated to begin to make some heavy changes. With the heroin addiction, one of the reasons why I got into recovery is because I was at Reggae on the River down in Redway in Humboldt County. Not a big reggae fan, but it was a party, and of course I'm going to go. So I went and took some liquid LSD, more than I had taken before, and had a vision of sort of the addiction as this sort of like black goo that had corrupted like my being. And it seemed like a sort of an alien or sentient kind of force that was had co-opted my life and was now living my life. And that sense of invasion really propelled me to want to shed it as a guiding force in my life. And so that led to a lot of other changes that ultimately got me clean. But you mentioned that there was a particular experience that was really, really deep. And one of the things that I've been studying in, for the show and in my private research is the fact that this is not the only reality, or that this is a flip side of what is reality, that there's like a more transcendental or essential part of what we're in that we can't grok often on the surface, but it's always there. And can you talk a little bit about either that experience or when you first started to realize that there was a deeper level to things, and that deeper level may in fact be more meaningful than the sort of surface lives that we're all living?
That realization happened with the very first hit of DMT, and I think
Okay.
that's the most spectacular aspect of it. In part, I believe because of its endogenous qualities, and the fact that it is produced naturally in your own body. So that there's a couple ways that over time it's helped me kind of change my perspective. If I could, a brief timeline, I guess. So
Yeah.
that first day, I mentioned I had done shrooms for several months leading up to it. So I had felt comfortable being in that psychedelic space. I had done quite a bit of the shadow work. I had, faced a lot of my demons and cried a lot of tears. And ultimately, you really can't lie to yourself when you're staring in the mirror on 5 grams of shrooms, and there's no one to blame but yourself. So I had really had, some really good therapeutic work coming from shrooms, but I didn't have that breakthrough epiphany. So that day that led up to it, once I had found out that I had access to DMT, I did as much research as I possibly could. So I read, Rick Strassman's book. I listened to as many podcasts as I could, and I felt as comfortable as I could get going into that experience. And I had the perfect setting. I had a good friend there that was there to sit with me, and over the course of about an hour and a half, and I mentioned this in my book, that I took about 50 hits, and I know there's a lot of people that can be like, no way, bullshit, but I did about 7 sessions. In each session I did, 5, 6, 7 hits, and really was pushing it because I was at that point where I really, if I didn't get some sort of answer, I was going to walk off into the woods and not come back. And it was at that point in my life where I was like, I need to figure some shit out. But that first hit, I would say, um, it instantly felt natural and innate and comforting. It wasn't scary like the sensation of LSD coming on, or when you have shrooms starting to go through your blood system, you kind of got to like hold on for this. It really was like the removing of the veil of a veil that I became more connected with my body and my senses, as much as everything is going wild and haywire, and all of the sensory inputs are kind of going chaotic with the spinning mandalas and things like that. But it,
Yeah.
it felt that this was the natural state of my body without all the filters on. So that it instantly felt comfortable. As much as it was mind blowing and like, holy shit, what just entered my body, it didn't feel scary and I felt comfortable in that space. But there was no, entities, there was no interactions, there was no inputs or downloads or anything like that. It was just kind of being exposed to this new environment and this new dimensional space. And one of the beautiful things about DMT is when you smoke it anyway, it only lasts, 6, 7 minutes. So, come back to lucidity, kind of process what happened. But once again, I was there to try to get some deeper answers. So, after letting it, integrate for a few minutes, the plan was then to keep pushing it. So pushed it a little bit further that time. And same thing. It's you're welcomed into this space, but at that point there was no interaction, no conversations or anything like that. Um, kept pushing it, kept pushing it, kept pushing it. Now we're, an hour plus into it. And that last session was the first time that I would say I had the first like, oh shit, this is something that's gonna stick with me. And I pushed it as far as I could, pleading to the universe that I need help. Like I need some answers, please. Like I need to figure some shit out. And again, not partly because I had every advantage and I knew that. And there was no reason for me to be struggling the way I was. And it was like, what is this? What's the issue? And that last session, all the sights and sounds stopped. All of the vibratory hum stopped. I instantly felt suspended in space. Like I wasn't being pulled up into a portal or anything. I wasn't, falling. And I was just suspending there. And I had the best way for me to describe it would be a DNA download or an upgrade or a software upgrade. And I mention that now because I want to talk about how that kind of has evolved over time. But this
Yeah.
particular time, it just felt a very real download of information. And for me, the quick way of describing it was it just connected all the proverbial dots in my life that were running chatter in my brain. And I was trying to connect the past with the future, and how could I have messed up as bad as I did? And what am I going to do now that I'm homeless? I have no job. I have no woman. Like all this shit was blown up. And it in that space, all of those dots in my brain got connected instantly. And it was kind of like, haha, you stupid human. If this is really what you're struggling about. And then those blew up, and then, a million dots, and then those blew up, and a trillion dots. And the take home of that was that the point isn't to connect all the dots in your life, it's to appreciate each dot for what it is. Same thing, like it's not to, to enjoy, it is to enjoy the quiet between the beat and the space between it. And it really was just a realization of coming back that all I have is this now, this 1 second, this one moment. And what the hell, Adam, if I still have this beautiful mind and body and every ability to change, all I can focus on is this second. And as simple as that sounds, that was that big foundational shift where it was instantly like, all right, well, you can lose the bear gut, you can stop being a jerk, you can stop whatever blaming other people, all of those things just lined up. And then it put that basically I stopped digging my hole deeper, and that day I started then turning around and digging myself out and stop the self-destructive path. Um, yeah, and then like I said, it's been a hell of a journey since then. But that first day of just stopping the rattle and chatter in my brain so I could actually just be me was the first time in my adult life that I had pure content, joy, and just happy being there.
Yeah.
And that was to feel that for the first time viscerally and physiologically was very, very comforting.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so how did that evolve into further experimentation with DMT? I mean, and where did you how was that directed? What were you seeking to find after that? Was it like an ongoing sort of a journey of discovery, and you chisel a little out here and chisel a little bit out there with successive journeys? I mean, or did you just have that experience and then relax with it for a little while? How did it evolve?
No, and DMT isn't really something you could get addicted to, and it's not something you necessarily crave or want to do. But over
Yeah,
the course of time, it was something that I did use, pretty heavily. And there were times where I was doing it multiple times a week, and sometimes a couple times a day. But always with the intent of consciousness exploration, looking to learn my inner psyche, and what can I take back from these realms. And at that point too, um, I now that I was at this age with no wife, no kids, no job, it kind of was like, I this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to, and I'm comfortable, kind of doing that now. So the the sessions changed from just going into this new dimensional space and exploring it, and knowing that it was profoundly different from, in my opinion, other psychedelic spaces. So when you're on shrooms or LSD, you still know that you're seeing this warped up world through your senses, but it's you still know kind of the reason or the input that's causing it. And if you see some crazy whale kind of floating over the wall, or the tree starts talking to you, you can kind of understand why that's happening. Where in DMT space, it really is its own space, its own type of um precision and crispness, and just really intentional movement. As chaotic and dynamic as it is, it's just very, very intentional and crisp. And um, it's clear that you're not just seeing the world through your five human senses that are altered. You now have different vibratory senses, or you're able to input different information or energy. But
yeah.
I guess how those sessions changed was it went from going just to this place and exploring it, like I said, you walk, in a 3D IMAX theater, to then being interacted with the beings and the entities. And that's when it started getting fun. And it's pretty much like my human consciousness after smoking DMT would be elevated or vibrating or humming at this space, or at this vibration, where they would be able to recognize it. And as I kept popping into this space, they wanted to explore me, and they were just as happy to see who I was. Kind of like, who the hell is this guy coming in this space, or how is he able to even see us or interact with us? And the first ones were kind of the fun gestury, um,
Machine elves type. I mean,
yeah,
or
the
you had a
machine
lot.
health, the jesters, the ones that were kind of happy to show you the space. And they became very comfortable with me, where I knew when I was coming back, I had this welcome committee. And that kind of changed and morphed to them showing me like the back of the house stuff, and showing me around that realm, showing me their friends and family is kind of how I interacted with it. But then this is where I think there's a lot of correlation to alien abduction stories and sleep paralysis, because over time, these interactions have changed and morphed too. Then they became really, they wanted to explore me, and I would go into this space, and I felt as though they were examining me, and not in necessarily in an invasive, painful, or sexual way, but they were clearly entering and moving through my body in a way that was like in a non-physical space. And it was kind of like invasive, because it kind of was happening without my permission. But
Yeah.
it was like, well, whatever, I'm in your space, in your dimension, and you don't seem to be harming me. So that was that first interaction with, all right, they're there and they're just kind of exploring who I am. And that happened, those type of interactions were maybe the first year or so of doing DMT. Then I had a couple pivotal ones since then, where I did have a similar interaction like that, where you're being examined, and you're kind of splayed out on this table, so to speak. And I had an interaction with what I called, or what I felt as though was my future self. And it wasn't me older with a longer beard, or me as a human form. It was just all of those other entities and interactions are clearly not human, and some sort of sentient being of some other thing. Where this just felt so comfortable me, and that I was coming back to do a diagnostic check, that I was coming to kind of to comfort me, and to say, hey, everything's good, you're on whatever. Like, this is what you should be experiencing. And that was a profound one to take home. it really nailed down the fact of not being afraid of death, knowing that your energy and soul or whatever will transmute into something
Mhm.
else or something greater than.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, that was like the oh shit. How do you tell that story without sounding too crazy? Uh,
You don't sound crazy to me, man.
but powerful. These are the things like you were saying with your LSD experience.
Yeah.
You take the experience back and you take the information back, and it almost produces a flaw that now gives you something to build further information on, and you can't unsee what you've seen or unfeel what you've unfeel. So the knowing that I'm comfortable and welcomed in this space, and that my energy will somehow transcend or move on into something else is a comforting way to live.
Yeah.
But then we can kind of maybe get into other topics other than the trip reports. But I think one that happened recently, and this is where I wrote to you and your audience because I'm really looking for input and kind of like how does this fit into those other stories or narratives. So I even have a chapter in my book entitled Transcendental Sex, Art, and Science, where I talk about how very comfortable I am using DMT in the bedroom as part of my sexual routine, how you can use it to enhance, your mental cognitive abilities. So it's not all the time that you're just constantly blasting off and you're lost. There are some, you really, if anything, it heightens your sensory abilities. And, so I'm very comfortable how that feels to be like, wow, my body's humming and vibrating the way it really should be.
Yeah.
There was this time, and it was only several months ago, that uh, it was very distinct and very unique, where I took the several hits and I was instantly in this like sleep paralysis state where I wasn't in my room. I couldn't move. I had no ability to function with my body. And I was just in this blue space. It was just this, there was no entities or anything there. I didn't see any like grays or anything, but I was just in this blue space. That's all and kind of just floating there. And I had a very distinct feeling of like a heated laser going up through the bottom of my feet, came all the way up, scanned up like kind of through my head and then back out through my feet. And I was petrified because I mentioned how I've never been in a fight. Like I've never been restrained. I've never been held against my will. I've never been where I didn't have control over my body. And I was scared because it was kind of like, what is this? Where are the DMT entities? Where's the DMT space? Where's my room? And it was that was the one that I came out of, and it was just constantly I said like oh fuck, like what happened, what happened, and um now I do want to preface it, and then I'll let you kind of maybe give your input on it. I didn't
Yeah.
feel as though it was anything negative or belligerent or mean or evil. If anything, I felt as though it was. So I mentioned those other things were kind of like a DNA download or a software upgrade. This felt as though it was a hardware upgrade, like something was truly being put into my body, or my antenna was being upgraded, or something happened to my physical body that has never happened since. And I don't quite know how to put it into the whatever multiple hundreds of other times I've been into that DMT space because I had no control over my body and I clearly had something done to me.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well,
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. Have you ever had any high strangeness experiences follow you out of a DMT state? I have a friend, David Stuss, who did a DMT session and then felt like something had attached to him. And then later on, even though he wasn't consciously aware of it, is someone he encountered later on said that he actually had that happen and then helped him get rid of it. But I'm wondering if you've had anything, strange that followed you back into this reality from those realms.
I wouldn't say I've had any, and certainly nothing negative or any type of like, energy lush or anything like that. I
Yeah.
would say what has come back is the heightened and enriched senses and abilities where now I feel hypersensitive to everything. So honestly, through all of these experiences, I listen to music differently. I feel touch differently, empathy, sympathy, like all of these things are dialed up where now, uh, and I think there is something, and I'm not saying that they're all the same, but I do also feel now way more sensitive to other beings, whether they're ghosts or energies or Uh, kind of just like the other day, several months ago, everybody has that feeling like somebody's looking over your shoulder. And I was home alone, and I kind of looked into the living room, and I said to whatever was there, I was like, you don't like come out and talk to me. Like if you're there, don't be afraid. I'm curious to hear, what do you have to say? And instantly, the second I said that, there was this like electric cicada sound buzz in my ear. Like the second I said that, and so things like that happen quite a bit. My dream state is very, very active. And you actually had a gentleman on recently talking about lucid dreaming and the power of what you take back from those realms. Uh, I do want to just a little asterisk to use DMT in with lucid dreaming is something that I think is really powerful and something I enjoy, where right before you're getting ready to go to bed, you get in bed, everything's the plan would be go deep into DMT space, but then plan on really just shutting the lights off and going right to sleep. And I've done it several times where you kind of just wake up the next morning and you never really got out of that DMT space. And I don't know if your endogenous DMT kind of kicks in and just keeps that realm open, but it's kind of like
Yeah.
a very, very deep, profound, lucid dream, psychedelic playground type thing that can happen. So
Yeah.
that's a fun thing to play with.
Yeah, and there's I mean, a lot of the ancient traditions talk about how when you're asleep, you've actually sort of ascend to the astral realm, or sort of other levels of being in the soul, and maybe that convergence there has something to do with that, like you're kind of bringing all those worlds together. Are you familiar with Andrew Yalomor?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think
Read his
he's
books. I love his strictly research scientist mind.
Yeah, and he's got a really compelling view of what reality is,
Mhm.
which basically like it's hyperdimensional, and that we live in a lower dimensional space within it, and that DMT represents like sort of a natural gateway that was planted here, sort of for humans to find, or any intelligent, sentient being to find, and ultimately come into the higher dimensional space, which is what the DMT realm represents. I wonder if you have any thoughts about like that. I mean, in terms of DMT being sort of a naturally planted mechanism for us to find and use to transcend. Do you think that, or what are your thoughts?
He uses the term technology. He says all the time how he considers it a technology, and I tend to agree with that because I look at it as whether it's psychedelics, deep meditation, the binaural beats that you mentioned, from Monroe Institute. I think all of those are allowing our human brain or antenna or body to receive information at different wavelengths or different energy. And that's it's very obvious that we're only taking such a very, very small percentage of what we're being bombarded with every day. And I
Yeah.
think DMT is one of those instant cheat codes where it instantly dials your machine up. So instead of just having AM or FM, when you smoke DMT, you've got the CD, the Sirius satellite, name it, whatever analogy you want to use,
Yeah.
it just instantly blasts you there. So as far as the technology, um, I think it does allow the human body and consciousness to operate at an optimal or near optimal level. And that's one of the common experiences that I have in the DMT state is that, and these are not the machine elves or the jesters. These are more like the insectoid mantis type energies. That there's quite a few interactions that I've had with those type beings that are showing you how to properly use your body. They're the mechanics showing you how to use this technology in your body being that technology. And uh, to show and to feel how a human body can breathe properly, to pulse properly, to pump its fluids properly, to absorb oxygen properly, to feel synapses firing properly, to move energy and heat through your body. And these are all things that, you feel not only like a little bit, but I mean, you're experiencing through every cell, every synapse, every possible point through your body. And to know that that's what the human body is capable of. Again, not feeling drugged or poisoned, but feeling elevated, enriched, and heightened. So in that aspect, it really is a technology that really just again, keep adding analogies, whether putting a turbocharger, a supercharger, or rocket fuel, whatever it may be, it's allowing the human to take in more information from this 3D human realm. But then I think that again, where DMT differentiates itself, is that it also gives you access to this other realm that is not accessible simply through shrooms or now you can
LSD
get
or
that through breathing and some of these other and endogenous increasing methods, which I'd definitely like to talk about as well. But yeah,
yeah.
that ability to explore something and to quote Terence McKenna, and I loved his approach where he kind of was the Andrew Gallimore and kind of like Adam Butler, where and I do want to say too, I went to college for almost 8 years, so I do have the academic background, and I feel like I can hang and bang with these intellectuals, but also
Yeah.
bring street knowledge and experiential thread to the story as well. But
Hmm.
Terence McKenna was kind of famous for always saying, if you don't believe me or if you think what I'm talking is bullshit, like just just try it. There's
Yeah.
no way that somebody's going to come out of a DMT experience and not have it be transformational.
Yeah.
Now, maybe not in my case, it was life-saving for me because I was just such in a dark, shitty place that whatever, like that's what needed to happen first, and then the transformation and all of the beautiful things. I'd like to think DMT and psychedelics can be used to help right from the get-go to enrich and enhance and make life better. You don't have to necessarily be in the dark space that I was, but it will certainly change your perspective on life, reality, what's possible, and what's out there.
There's so many directions I want to go in. One of the things that I read in the magazine article you sent me, that was in the Psychedelic Scene magazine, you listed the lessons that you've learned through your experience on DMT. And I kind of wanted to go through those and talk a little bit about them. And these seem to be synonymous with, ancient traditions that have gone back. Basically, in every culture, there is like a mystical, a group or a series of epiphanies that have long been the fuel for helping people get beyond, their ego. And a lot of those have been neglected over the years as we've gotten more and more scientific and materialistic. We've abandoned those notions. But again, now that we move into sort of the more advanced realms of physics and whatnot, they seem to be coming back from a different direction. But I'm just going to list these real quick. You are more than your physical body. Everything is energy and vibration. Self-knowledge leads to self-love, which will lead to the love of your neighbor. Aliens, ghosts, DMT entities, and non-corporeal energy forms are real. We are all one. We are all facets of source. We are never alone. It's natural, innate, and endogenous. Otherworldly realms and alternate dimensions are real and ever present. And then there's a heading, repair of trauma, processing loss, and putting fear into perspective. And then the next progressive step in human evolution. One of the things that I've been covering, it's come up a lot, is that idea that we're an evolving consciousness and that this moment represents sort of a precipice of this change that was being forced upon us one way or the other. And it's almost like kind of an adapt or die situation. How do you see what that evolution unfolding? Do you think it would be primarily through psychedelics, or do you think that some of the more traditional methods of meditation and even Monroe's method could work the same? And where do you see that evolution leading us?
I think it's really important to go back to ancient traditions and the Hermetic principles. And, there's a lot of great podcasts and a lot of great people doing research and putting together documentaries that are hopefully exposing people to the importance of these rituals. And it doesn't have to be necessarily based on a particular god or, a religious creed or anything like that. A lot of the most important or the basic ones have to do with looking within, knowing yourself, taking the time to go into that dark cave for a week or to whatever it's, sit on the mountaintop for a season. And I think today, you mentioned again that black goo that you saw on your LSD trip. I talk all the time and use the analogy of plaque, and that's how I saw it, where I feel as though society just puts so much plaque on people, and some of it's self-imposed, and we're, a lot of times we're our own worst enemy, but there's just so much crap that gets built up over the years, and people need either a mechanical or chemical, some sort of removal of that plaque. And I think psychedelics are just one of the ways that it can blast that plaque off. And now once that plaque is removed, I think it's a twofold benefit. Not only Are you able to now shine your inner light and express yourself artistically, creatively to show love? But you're able to receive it because that plaque was a barrier to love and connection to other people, to God, to source, whatever your, connection to something greater is. If you're just bogged down with keeping up with the Joneses and then drunk and prescription pills and smut on social media and then being fed crap from mass media, it's like no one ever gets time to think for themselves. And a lot of those inner traditions weigh heavily on looking within, knowing yourself, understanding who you are before you can start, worrying about the external world. And I think psychedelics force that sometimes violently with the inner work and shadow work that it does. But I think deep meditation, yoga, walking in the woods, um, I mentioned ending up in Eureka and mentioning that I ended up working out there with a jujitsu club, going to karate, things like that. Just things that you can take time away from the day, the screen, the shit, and even sometimes your wife or your kids or your job, even if those are all good, you need to take time for yourself. So I want to say that's because I know that psychedelics aren't for everybody, and the benefits of what happened in my life and the transformation can be had in other ways, I guess is what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
um the I think it's so talk about like Monroe Institute. I think there's multiple things there that are happening. So
Real quick though, I mean, you just to contextualize it for the audience, you actually went to the Monroe Institute and did a retreat to sort of compare the modalities, right, and see what the experiences were like and how they were similar and different. Is that a fair way to say it?
and I say that and I smile because that was really one of those things where I manifested that trip and just to kind of set it up. So I talked about my prior life where I was making all this money and I had at one point I owned 15 houses in my life and I had all the bank accounts and all of that. Where now, I'm landscaping making 20 bucks an hour. I don't have any of the material wealth. I'm truly recreating everything in my professional career. So for me to take a week off and for me to be able to, to afford to go there was one of those things that it really was not, Adam, you're worth it. You're valued. You know, go to Monroe instead of paying the IRS the taxes and that they'll still be here, kind of that was one of those just big moments of no, you're worthy. And people need to look in the mirror and tell themselves that you are worthy of this. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I just got back this last November and it was the most magical experience. And believe me, I'm not a paid promoter of what they've got going on there, but my own experience is I picked, and the cool thing is you can kind of pick who your teachers are. So you do have to go through the gateway voyage, which is their basically prerequisite in order to do the other ones. But that you really get a really good understanding of what their technology is and get exposed to really a lot of the nuts and bolts of it. Um, but you get to pick who your teachers are. So I picked who I thought I'd have the two best connections with, which I did. I ended up knowing, and I mentioned this before recording, Michael Phillip from Third Eye Drops. And I know you actually interviewed him recently.
Yeah,
I
great
knew
guy. Love him.
awesome dude. And I knew
Yeah.
he was going from a mutual fan, and they were like, "All right, do you know that he's going to be there?" But I wasn't going to go there and start, hounding some guy about his podcast. But they ended up putting us together as roommates. So that was a kind of long thing. Him and I spent a week together, just debriefing one another and really befriending one another. And I still, talk to him this day quite often. Um, but so I went there with the intent of comparing my DMT and shroom sessions to what I was hearing they were able to produce with their binaural beats. So I was hearing about people, astral projecting and having these out of body experiences, having deep meditation where they're able to connect with past loved ones. They have things where they're able to get souls that are kind of stuck in purgatory to kind of move on. They're making some pretty out there claims. But now I was making some pretty out there claims from what I was experiencing into my psychedelic space. So I again, I did the research. I didn't read any of actual Bob Monroe's books, but I did as much research as far as documentaries and things. And yeah, I spent a week there. So it's in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia. It's an absolutely beautiful campus. Um, if anybody's worried about the quality of food, the food there is absolutely amazing. Their coffee is fantastic. I just want to put that out there too. But
It's important. Speaking of which,
well, oh, but the probably the best thing is that everybody puts their phone away for the week. There's no
exactly.
TV. Everything's done on a bell. Like they have a big dinner bell that's rung throughout. That's how all the sessions are started. Uh, but it's 8 hours a day of deep meditation, and you go through the different focus levels. And I went there, really, I don't want to say pessimistic or looking to doubt their process. I felt as though the people were telling their authentic stories, but I was kind of one of those guys right at the front being, will I know if I'm in focus 10 as opposed to focus 12? Will I instantly know when I'm in 15 or 21? And kind of, poking holes in what they were trying to show. And at the end of the week, I could say definitively that each one of those focus levels are very distinct. You have a complete physiological and emotional and I guess astral response to each one of those vibrations. And it's because it's a very simple process. I mean, they're putting a low frequency hertz or low hertz frequency, excuse me, uh, in your brain by having your brain register the difference between what they're putting in each ear. So they're able to, have your brain vibrate or hum at a very specific energy. And if you can, with practice, use that to your advantage, you can then get into these different spaces. Now, I didn't have an out-of-body experience. I didn't leave myself. Now, Michael did. I don't know how much he shared about his experience with that. And
Yeah, we talked quite a bit about that. Yeah, yeah.
seeing his eyes when he came out of it and being the first person that he talked to, I believe him heartedly, excuse me, what he experienced.
Yeah.
But what I did experience was the ability to separate my physical body. So, I mean, to that first point, you're more than your physical body. And you know
Mhm.
that more definitely if you do psychedelics or certainly with DMT because you blast off into the space. But knowing that yeah, you definitely are more than your physical body because you can feel um just the different levels of energy beyond just the meat and the cells. And you become aware of that. And then you can become aware that you can connect with other uh beings, I guess, and some of it is with guided meditation. So you're producing these scenes in your brain, and it's going to be subjective and personal to each person. But I know my deep meditation sessions with the binaural beats allowed me to get into spaces that I hadn't able to get into before. Now, the beauty of that though, too, is that, and maybe skipping around to the points that I was making about how it's endogenous. Um, that is one of those things though, with practice, you can almost get your body to get back to that space because you know what it feels like. So you know what it feels like to be in focus level 12. All right, this is going to be a hum, it's going to vibrate, you're going to feel it, and you can kind of make those sensations happen. Uh, just like you can kind of elicit your own psychedelic holotropic breathing, DMT high.
It's interesting. After I talked with Michael, I had done a little bit of the gateway process before, but that rekindled my interest. So I've been working my way through the sessions since my interview with him. And what to that point you were just making, it's like they start you off in focus level 10, which is kind of like I don't want to say a light meditative like place, but it's like you're focused and you're mindful and you're not as aware of yourself. Focus 12 is putting your awareness out beyond your body and kind of reaching out, but there very much is a sense of being in each focus level and then getting to where you can remember it and recreate it as you do additional tapes. And I find that is very, very helpful because when I meditate, like I'm a consistent meditator, I've been meditating for a few years, and it's always kind of like a journey into the unknown. Like I'm trying to focus as much as I can and get as far as I can into that focus, but it's always I don't have a ground base level identified as to like I want to start here and go on to deeper levels, and that has helped me do that by identifying sort of the state of mind that I get in focus 10 or focus 12. I haven't gotten beyond that yet because I keep going through those tapes that have gotten me to focus 10 and focus 12 so far. But yeah, I just love the fact that it clearly delineates what these levels are, how they feel, and then tells you what you can accomplish through being in those levels. And that has really, really helped me with my native practice because I can start there when I'm meditating And that gives me, like I said, a sort of a ground level that is proving really, really useful.
And it can be part of your own personal ritual. And I think that's what's lost or missing in a lot of people's lives when they think about organizing
Exactly.
is, like I went to a funeral the other day and beautiful church, beautiful sermon, all, but it's like really up, down, kneel, and it's like this is why people aren't going here. And I'm a very open-minded person, but
Hmm.
uh yeah, it's creating something that works for you. And I think the gateway process, or even just, all right, I'm gonna listen to this, and this is my track, and this is gonna get me into that. Goes back to the point of maybe somebody sitting there still with headphones, that's not gonna work. But walking through the quiet woods, listening to birds and crickets and cicadas can be have the exact same effect. Or for some people, it's taking a ride in their car and blasting music, So whatever,
Yeah.
I think that's the point, is that whatever it is to work for you to connect back to yourself, to just kind of disconnect from all of that other shit and to go within. And, like I said, whether it's to explore the best aspects of yourself and, hey, how can I be a better dad, a better husband, a better employee, a better reporter, all of those things, or whether it's to look within and be like, oh shit, I gotta find the cracks in my psyche that need sealing, or else I'm gonna, run off the cliff.
Yeah.
But that like I said, that's not going to happen unless you quiet everything around you. And part of the beauty of going to the Monroe and actually having the campus there is that you're forced to do 8 hours a day where there's no work, there's no phone, there's no other distractions. They have what's called these check units. So their own little individual where you can make it completely black. You have your own headphones. You're in your own space. And honestly, if there was no music being piped in, you still would have had, incredible experiences. And I do want to, and maybe I should have said this before starting about this topic. I want to clarify, I did not do any DMT or psychedelics when I went there. They
Yeah.
really had a strict no alcohol or drug policy. It was something that I wanted to, but now, so what did I take away from that? In addition to those points, and we could kind of go over some of them, but I think to your audience, they're probably like, yeah, I know, like, they figure that stuff out on their own way. But I think there is something that maybe the whatever vibratory hum or elevated space is happening in that DMT space, like could that be potentially replicated by a binaural beat? So could there be a focus level DMT, like whatever number they would assign to it? But if their technology is basically just adjusting the frequency that's being received by your brain, is there some way of measuring, and this is kind of like I was proposing to them, and who knows how that would potentially work in the future, where could you measure my brain when I'm deep into these psychedelic spaces, specifically in DMT space? And is there something like the equivalent of, well, at whatever, at 16 to 18 hertz is when he's consistently in this DMT realm? And could you replicate that? And now I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but just as a scientific research, I'm very curious to see where all of these things lead. So whether it's, like I said, psychedelics, binaural beats, is it what the autistic nonverbal children are tapping into? Is it what we're able to tap into in lucid dreaming? Is it when
Yeah.
people have near-death experiences that they're able to, slow time and space and tap into something in a past life regressions? Is it connected to the alien? I don't act like I have the answer to all of this. I think the common thread, and this is where I love seeing everybody kind of chew on it from their own area of expertise, is that there's clearly something greater than we are way more than our five senses, and that there are multiple ways to elevate not only the original five senses that we have, but there are ways to add on countless, like, and I don't have a name for them, and I don't understand, you could say maybe some of it's intuition, some of it's telepathy, some of it's, maybe there are some names for some of it, but man, we as humans are just so much more powerful and capable than what we normally walk around in. And now that may be for survival, and that's like, Aldous Huxley's reducing valve kind of theory where,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
to protect us in essence and to keep us alive. And I understand that aspect. But once I got out of that human or the work rat race where it was work 70 hours a week, constantly money, constantly whatever, where I was the miserable, overworked, alcoholic asshole, where so many people are just in that rut, where once I finally took a step back and was like, wow, there's more to this human experience. There's more to my consciousness and my physical body than just using it to make a paycheck. Uh, that's been a really fun exploration the last few years, and it's going to continue for the rest of my life, which is why I really appreciate shows like you and your guest. I've really learned quite a bit, honestly, the last month or so studying your guest. So I think
I,
we are all talking
yeah,
about it intellectually, calmly, and considerately. So
yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that for me that is the difference between a happy and fulfilled human species and the species that we're in right now. I mean, I see so many signs of sort of like this, whether you want to call it a spiritual malaise or, disconnection. We're all in that ego space constantly, and it's reinforced by social media and the technology that we use and the ways that we deal with each other. And it seems to require a wholesale reimagining of what it is to be human. And I don't know how to get the bulk of people to that place, but it has to start at least with conversations and like exposing people to the idea that there may be more to life to experience than just the constant rush to achieve more, get more, and get ahead. And I feel like meditation has done part of that for me. Drug recovery makes you look at yourself and your life and see where you've gone wrong and what's unhealthy, and that's useful for this space. But and I think that DMT and other psychedelics, as has been shown with the therapeutic uses of like ketamine and those sorts of things, they all seem to have a very therapeutic effect on people's minds when they learn how to give out, to sort of get away from the egocentric being that we've all kind of constructed for ourselves. And that seems to be one of the main root issues, is that we're all married to this ego construction that we call ourselves, but that is not really ourselves. It's just like it's just noise that your mind seems to make, but that is not the core of your being. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's I kind of like that's what I'm trying to push, like get people to engage with that reality, which also annexes all these other phenomenon and realities, like you were saying, near-death experiences and all those sorts of things. They all seem to cohere around that notion that whether it's a soul or just a deeper level of the human mind, the source, whatever it is, there's something much deeper and richer that we used to know and that we've lost. And if we want to survive and thrive as a species, it's going to require us to rediscover it.
and it's such a delicate balance because you want to, like you said, push it on people, but you can't. You have to expose
Exactly.
people to be an advocate for it. But this is maybe where there's some correlation to my experience overcoming alcohol. So now I'm 4+ years being free of alcohol, and that's one of those similar to, you have to experience it for yourself. You have to, I had plenty of people that were trying to get me to quit or pointing out all the reasons why, and until I actually wanted to for myself. So this awakening or enlightenment or change, whatever, has to be something that somebody wants. So you can't, just like you can't push a religion on somebody. It has to
Yeah.
be something that they're open to. And I think, for somebody that all of this happened to me after 40 years, I have to give people leniency to know that, fuck man, it happened pretty late in my life. So if it hasn't, when I'm talking to people in their 20s and 30s, I've got to give them the benefit of the doubt that it's going to take them some time and that they're on a different part of their journey. So, there's that part of it where, uh, because if it's not learned heartfeltly and truly by yourself, it's not going to stick. So
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of ways that people have these enlightening moments, whether it be a trauma like a major car accident, or an event, an abduction, near death experience, a health scare, a death in a family. There are a lot of things that kind of jolt people to this realization. But I would say, and this is how I try to approach the topic, by being the example. Now, I'm not the example of material wealth and the fancy things and the cars anymore. Like I could have been whatever 5, 10 years ago. But now what I
Mhm.
can be the advocate for is, man, living this lifestyle just feels so much better. Like it's so easy not to be an alcoholic because it's so nice not to be hungover. It's so nice not to have a bear gut and waste fucking thousands of dollars a month to go every time you go out to dinner, half the bill is alcohol. To know that every time I drove, I'd have to worry about getting a DUI because literally every time I would drive, I would drink. Every morning, I would start my morning with bourbon and my coffee. Um, like all of these nasty things where, and I thought I was hiding it because I was the successful guy, where it's like, you know, everybody knew, you know, in retrospect now I could see like what a fool I was. But to now have my physical health, my mental health, stamina, clarity of thought, to not be hungover, to not have a headache. It's just, it feels so, so good to be free of alcohol. So I have very, very little fear that I'll ever go back to that lifestyle again because I just know how much better this feels. But same thing, once you realize that you can take ownership of your life and that, and you talked about this before we started recording about, you know, taking ownership and kind of doing that inner work and that shadow work. And you know, people have bad trips, they quote unquote, because it's difficult. But that's what's needed to have that rebirth, so to speak, or that awakening, is that you really have to do that inner psyche work. And whatever forces somebody to do that, once they do that and come out of it, it becomes so easy to talk about the power of it because it's so enriching to be comfortable in your own skin, to not give a fuck what anybody thinks, to like, there's so many selfish personal benefits that come out of being loving, being empathetic, being selfless, putting other people first, because everything just constantly comes back to you tenfold. And it's like this self-perpetuating, like, oh yes, like know yourself and then love your neighbor. And then that'll just keep multiplying. And, you know, just from a personal standpoint, talking about losing the three long-term relationships in my life to now the woman I'm with, we don't fight at all. And not to say we don't have disagreements about topics, but it's just everything is approached with love, with respect, with admiration, with respect for the other person's point of view. And probably one of the biggest things that I took out of learning about all of my own warts and scars and how bad I fucked up in my life, but then taking ownership of that and then giving myself a second chance to kind of, you know, get up from being knocked down again. I convey that luxury, or I convey that right to everybody else. So everybody else has the right to have their own opinion, to disagree with me, to have their own experiences that would give them a different opinion, to have their own perspective. And that's where I think that next level of human consciousness or evolution can take place. But not now everybody's all one political side, or now we're all agree on everything. I think there can still be difference of opinion, but it's, you approach it with love and respect of the other person, with the desire to always bring up the person next to you, not bring them down. And that's a life as a human species that I think is obtainable. Now, to your point, you brought up, is it the speciation event that has to happen where we have like the enlightened humans go off and become our own thing and the other ones don't, or somehow we can all collectively come as a group? But you know, I don't know the answer to that, but I know to wake up full of love, gratitude, joy, to not have road rage, to, you know, when you're standing in the line at the market, to actually look at the little kid and make faces at him, or talk to the veteran with his hat on and make a conversation instead of, oh, what the fuck, I'm 8 minutes late now. Like, it's just so much more comes out of your life when you're not a pent up dick pointing the finger at everybody else.
Exactly right. Yeah, no, I
I could rant there,
appreciate it.
but
No, no, I mean, I totally get everything that you just said. It's interesting, you know, I mean, so many people try to, when they define these things, it ends up coming to religious terms, but there's like this new emerging kind of worldview that seems to be like spiritual but not religious, connected to source or whatever else. You mentioned that you had interaction with beings at one point that sort of showed you the back end of what the DMT reality is. Where have you arrived in terms of what your conception of what the universe is? Do you have something that you carry around with you in terms of what the architecture of things may be and what we as humans represent within that architecture, or is that still kind of loose for you?
it's loose because even just over the course of my experience with psychedelics over the whatever last 3 or 4 years, from meeting my future self to the interaction with these entities, you know, so it's what's going to happen next year. So I want to leave it open, and what other person am I going to learn from? So
Yeah, because you
I'm
have more to learn, basically, is what you're saying. Yeah.
really dynamic. Now I'm comfortable saying that again, we're way more greater, or excuse me, way greater than our physical body, and that we have the ability to tap into a lot of different vibrational information and energies if we practice it, whether or induce it through psychedelics or DMT. I do believe that there's an interconnectedness of of all beings, energetically, that now whether it's your aura or your spiritual field or energy, the vibe you put off, I believe that's real. I believe that the resonant characteristics, like actually, vibrating together and resonating is a powerful thing. So if you're putting out love and connection and empathy, you're going to get that back. And that's the people that interact with puppies and babies and everybody likes them, and you walk into a room and lights it up. It's because you're putting out that resonant love, and you're creating that. I do believe that time is something that's malleable and that it is a human concept. I've experienced, once again, not only my future self, but I feel as though I've had some very memorable and maybe not memorable, maybe the opposite word of that, something that didn't seem to just be like a human, like Adam Butler, memorize it from this. It was, I've had very clear reenactments of past beings that I was, so I think that there is some fluid movement there. And then listening to, like I said, the telepathy tapes, things like where you have just a whole group and swath of people that aren't looking to get any type of recognition, money, clout. They're not selling books, or some of them are, but I say that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Saying that there's a different way of communicating information, and it's there. All of that means that what we've been told or taught needs to be changed and rearranged and expanded upon. And I think we're in it, and it's people like you and people like your guests that are allowing this to happen. Is that there is a conversation now with the so-called white coats, lab coats, the doctors, the PhD students that are now bringing intelligent conversations to the table on these fringe kind of topics, combined with experiential stuff, where I think there's so many data points now that it can't be disputed. And I think it's almost like, unless you're trying to keep your tenure or you're worried about backlash, that's really the only way you can stay with the concepts that we had 20, 30, 40 years ago, where clearly there's a shift happening. We're in the middle of it. And yeah, let's be open to how we receive that information. I know personally, my experience with other beings, this, high dimensional space, has only led to a more thorough knowing of myself. I said a better connection to my body, a brain-heart coherence, an understanding of how my physiology works, a better understanding of reading people around me, and just I'm happy to be here. So combined with that kind of be here now mentality of just enjoy every second, and not the desire to connect the dots of my past and my future, to just live happily knowing that I'm only going to resonate with the energy that I want to resonate with. It's a very empowering, and it's not cockiness or arrogance. It's just a knowing that I'm in control of what I put out and what I allow into my body. And then when bullshit does happen, when the whether you stub your toe or you get a speeding ticket or something, you actually have a really bad event happen in your life, you're able to process it in a way where you can put it in a perspective where it's not going to drive you crazy. If anything, you can learn from it, put another badge on your sash, so to speak, and continue on as an observer of this human consciousness, which is fun and beautiful and awesome if you can just get out of your own way and not be bogged down with the plaque or the black shit that was bogging us both down.
Yeah, I love that.
Honestly, like, now think
Yeah.
about, imagine that the lives that I've lived, or the paths that our lives could have taken, where,
Yeah.
fuck man, I wouldn't be here really.
I'd be dead. I'd be absolutely be dead. And my family would be without my kids without their father, my loving wife without her husband. And I thank God every day that she stuck around with me and helped guide me through this. And we're kind of both now on this exploratory journey. Like, she gets the same depth of being that, I found through recovery and all my explorations. She's been quite the partner. So I appreciate you, Amy, because she'll watch this, of course.
You just gave me goosebumps because it's fuck. Because how many young men and not even necessarily young men and women, but how many moms, dads, kids lost them to somebody
Yeah.
beautiful, suicide, or to mental health, or they just ran from their problems. And that's why I feel empowered to share this message, because there is a better way of knowing and understanding yourself and how you interact with society. And another beautiful aspect of psychedelics is the interaction that you can have with an intimate loved one or your significant other once you do the inner work. Because like I mentioned earlier, you then extend that to them. And with my own personal example, I mentioned the woman that I'm with now, and coming on 3 years going with her. Everything that she does that would be considered like would or potentially piss somebody else off or would have pissed me off in the past is now something I consider a quirk that I love, I giggle about, I laugh. It's something that I want her to share more of her quirks and uniqueness, where the women that I was with in the past, and they were beautiful 10 out of 10, highly successful, intelligent women, but I would get so pissed off at the tiniest thing because I wasn't giving them the space to be themselves. And how could they be, how do you take an extra 10 minutes to get here? How do you change where you want to go on the way? How do you not name whatever, put something in the fridge wrong, put this away wrong, do something, put your shoes in the wrong place, where now all of those things with this other woman and are just looked at from I'm so lucky she's in my life. I love her, and God forbid she's ever not in my life. I'm gonna remember where she puts her shoes, or I'm gonna remember that she did this, or and it's such an amazing way to connect with your loved one. And then, whether you use it sexually or intimately, which I talk about in my book quite a bit, but just to know somebody, to understand somebody, and then to extend the ability to be raw and to be flawed with that to that other person. And it's as opposed to project your own insecurities on that person, you
Exactly
actually,
right.
and that you empower one another to shine your light on it, and then not make a judgment call on it, to say, all right, well, this is what we're working through right now. I mean, it may take 2 weeks or 2 years, but I'm going to be here to help you work you through it, instead of haha, point your finger and be a dick. And I just, maybe that's the comment. I was just such a mean, nasty dick to myself and to other people. And I bared the brunt of it, where now I'd like to think that I really try to do the opposite, where I can be the light that walks into the room. I can take the darkness from other people and transmute it into something positive. And to know that I'm not trying to push my own perspective on anybody, because you wouldn't want that. We
Yeah.
all, there's enough space for us all to have our own kind of life experiences.
Well, that's one thing that the recovery process helped me see was that uh when I was in, my addiction or whatever, everyone was always an extension of me. Like I looked at everyone like how they could serve what I need or how I could manipulate them and to sort of be somehow a buffer to what my goals were or what the life I wanted. And it was never about helping them to achieve their own identity. It was about how can they all contribute to, James. And like realizing that that is an unhealthy way to kind of project your needs onto other people is really, really humbling and transformative. Once you realize you're doing it, you feel a lot of guilt and you have to kind of work through that as well. But yeah, I mean, learning how to live with yourself gives you the ability to help other people or allow other people to be their own thing as well. And that's hugely important for folks to have fulfilling lives, and so it's really important that we allow that for our partners and our kids and the people that are close to us in life.
It's important for you to have that recognition that you were that person that was always looking to be the take. And that's where holding that proverbial mirror up to yourself is important, because if some of those other people in your outside life would have, said that to you, you would have gotten nasty and said,
Oh
no.
yeah, totally,
You know?
totally.
But this is where I was going to say that the selfish kind of like part of that is you receive so much more when you switch it around, where now you provide more value without asking. You provide, and again, my own personal experience. Now that so I'm not making nearly the amount of money that I have, but the last, like, I always get lunches bought for me. The last 2 days I was at work, I had lunch brought to me by a couple buddies. I get weed given to me all the time. I've got trips given to me. I've gotten handshakes of money just to be like, yeah, whatever. I'm like paying it forward, man. You've done it before, without asking for anything. And and I'll say this now with my book and sharing to your audience. I always offer a free copy of my book. I'll happily email anybody a PDF copy. I'm not trying to get $2 off of this, because I know if it lands with the right person and they can pass that on and pass that on, somehow it'll be it'll be easier. So yeah, my email, booksbyadambutler@gmail.com. I'll happily send you a free PDF copy. I've sent paperback copies too if somebody really wants it or needs it. But it's because, yeah, let's just, the more you can do, the more value you can add, and the more love and empathy, the more comes back to you in every aspect of your life. And now that's kind of where I'm sitting in this beautiful spot where I'm in this complete unknown. I have no idea where my career is going to go, what I'm going to do for the next step of money. Um, Now I'm writing my next book. I'm going on a couple other podcasts. I plan on going back to the Monroe Institute. I plan on doing fun exploratory stuff, but without any connection to a desired outcome. Well,
Exactly right. Yeah, you just
surrendering completely to it because I know I'll never put myself in a situation that doesn't resonate perfectly with what I'm aligned to and what my intuition says I should be doing. So if I'm around any assholes, I'm going to call them out. If I'm in a job that I don't like, I won't work there. If I'm with a woman who I shouldn't be with, or I'll never settle for anything that doesn't, whatever, just align with me. And again, that's a very enriching, freeing way to live. And you'd be surprised and it's not a lonely path. That's not like, oh, fuck, now I got to walk this lone wolf and I'm going to push everybody aside. Just the opposite. You'd be so surprised at how many people are joining that path, whistling and linking arms with you, being like, oh, what a breath of fresh air. Like, you're based on truth, honesty, integrity, rawness. Like, there's a lot of empathy, love. There's a lot of tenets that we can build a new belief system off of. And again, because it just feels good, because it's going to make you a better dad, a better host, a better husband, all of those things. And it'll help me be a better mentor and whatever the next step in my life is. But it's certainly not going to be belligerent, mean, narcissistic, alcoholic, pointing the finger at everybody. That's not going to get anybody anywhere.
and real quick, I mean, I want to ask about how you went from being an experiencer of this stuff to writing your book, and then what you were hoping to accomplish with putting the book together. And do you feel like it has achieved what you hoped when you set out?
So I published the book in March of 2023. So it's just coming on its 2 year anniversary. And so I mentioned how I went to college for almost 8 years. So I was very comfortable as far as writing and compiling information. And uh, I've always been a reader growing up, so I've read thousands and thousands of books. So that was kind of always an outlet of mine. So that was a natural way for me to share the information. And I felt as though it was important because as much as like the spirit molecule, and anybody interested in DMT, I would start with the Rick Strassman spirit molecule. You mentioned Andrew Gallimore. He has some really good books that I also would recommend reading, even potentially before mine. But there wasn't an easily accessible 100-page field guide that covered kind of the basics of, all right, what is it? What's the molecule? What are its applications? Recipes, so you can make it yourself, and then some kind of like real life applications on how it can be integrated and what it did. And I felt as though there is a lot of valuable and intelligent voices in the DMT space. But I felt as though if I could add my voice to where, kind of the rich kid from New England that had it all, that had every advantage, that self-destructed because I was such this narcissistic asshole who was literally on the verge of killing himself, to then coming on the other side, that there was this because there was such a great swing of that I had, that my value, excuse me, that there was value to me sharing my story, that I could maybe resonate with the funny looking bald tattooed guys that maybe, or women that would be turned off by the standard looking doctors or researchers. So, but I also felt comfortable hanging and banging, like I said, with that group as well. So I was hoping to be able to bridge the gap between the academic world and absorb the literature and the research, but then be able to sit down in whatever, an inner city type setting, and be able to talk with the people that may need it the most. And my goal was, so when I was writing the book, I had realized that I did want to live. And it was a very distinct moment where I got really another kind of like download type thing where it was, all right, Adam, you're going to live. And part of the reason was one of my nieces was also going through some mental health stuff. And I realized that, fuck, like I need to be here to help her, to absorb some of her shit, and to share my experiences to really help her. And I had this incredible connection with her spiritually, that I knew that, fuck, I'm gonna, if nothing else, before I go, I'm gonna pass some information to her. And that gave me the desire and the strength to say, you know what, if I can help her, maybe I can help 10 people. If I can help 10, then you know what, maybe there's an opportunity to help 100. And now 2 years after it, I can say the book sales has been more than I could have ever expected. I mean, it's sold in like 10 different countries. It's all over the world. The audio version selling good, the Kindle version selling good. It's been brought around the country by friends and family, and it seems to be resonating. But the what I've really taken away from it is I have so many emails, personal conversations, texts from people that have said, Adam, like, thank you for sharing your story. It's exactly what I needed to hear when I needed to hear it. Or I was on that ledge looking over it, and what you said really pulled me back. Or, you're the third person that said the same thing, so I'm really going to look into it. Or, fuck, Adam, like, you gave me goosebumps by what you said, because, and it's, I could go down by all these comments, and it was that's what's giving me the hope and desire that if enough people share this message, there'll be enough people that when they hear DMT or shrooms, if they don't know, and I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, what's DMT? And it allows me to have a calm conversation about what it is, where it comes from, how it's in our own bodies, and how it's naturally in plants. With the more opportunity I can share with people that there is another aspect to drugs or psychedelics, and it's not just the crazy rave scene or what the government wanted to push in the 70s or 80s. It's, there is real therapeutic value. It is saving lives. There are real life applications in a lot of different avenues, from, end of life help, helping people transition to, all of the mental health stuff that's been proved out, with the couples therapy with MDMA. And, my hope is just to be another rational voice, even though some of the stuff I say is kind of out there, but to say, hey, listen, this is my experience, believe it or not, but this is what happened to me, and this is me on the other side of it. And it's a better place. And if I could be one tiny microcosm of how dark, nasty, and internally conflicted and shitty I was, and how that was this cancer that rotted everything around me, turned into the opposite. Oh, if that could just keep growing out. And it's very obvious when you meet people like yourself, like Michael, and I wrote some of the name down to your prior guest, but you can tell when you look at them in the eye, and you see what they've been through and what they've experienced, and they've kind of come back on the other side. It's not that they're some enlightened soul or they have all the answers, but they know, or most importantly, that what not to do, and that we are way greater than what we've been told. And in most cases, we're limiting ourselves. And then once that's removed, I think then we can all individuate, we can all show our unique selves, and then we can all bring our own unique piece of the puzzle.
That is profound. I mean, and that's one of the things that I've enjoyed most about this show is that when I started, I was sort of opening my mind to the fact that people were having these transcendental experiences, and started with like sort of NHI contact, that sort of thing. But it's gotten so much more than that, and all of these people who've come on the show have had these, not all of them, but a lot of them have had these transformative experiences that in the past I would have been like, did that really happen? That seems weird, you know? But then, like, when you engage with them and you talk with them, they're absolutely authentic about what they've gone through, and they're not pushing any kind of agenda. They're just like, there's something else, you know, and we can try and engage with that and hopefully enrich ourselves and our species and our society, or we can pretend like, the universe is all billiard balls colliding on this, galactic pool table, but that's way less fulfilling, way less magical, and leaves us, I think, spiritually stranded, sort of, and so, yeah, I love these conversations, and I love meeting people like you who've, done the work and found something in the universe for themselves and for others that can really help us all
And if I
be
could
more
add
grounded.
to the point that maybe people that lean more materialist, or that, would not necessarily haven't had a psychedelic experience, or would look at this and just be like, that's just fabrications of their brain, that it's the drugs producing this. And whether it be a psychedelic experience, or whether it be a UFO abduction, whether it be a really profound lucid dream, I think most people that experience these things don't say that they have all of the answers, or say that, oh, this is definitely this. Even as educated, not educated, but as what am I trying to say? like Gallimore, as much as he's rigid about his science, he's still open to be like, yeah, this is such a profound space, and I'm learning new stuff every day. And he's even open to be like, hey, this is gonna change. Um, Fuck, where the hell was I going with that? Just lost my train of thought.
Well, no, I mean, I love it. I think that like part of what is allowing people to kind of reinterpret the reality and sort of reassess what is at play are these, encounters that they're having with one or more of these phenomenon. And that's what kind of why I went back to like, I want people to have them. You can't push this sort of thing, but whatever is accessible in their lives to kind of engender these magical experiences, I hope that more and more people can find it, you know?
Except, and I was gonna say that the point I wanted to make was that it doesn't matter. So like the hard question of consciousness. So is it coming from within or without? Are these experiences real or not real? Are they just fake and fabrications or not? I think, we can have that discussion, but what can't be disputed is the actual results, the tangible results, the soldier that came back that lost his whole platoon and was, going crazy, who is now back to being a family man, or, the woman that lost her child it can now function and continue loving her other children and move on to continue being a mom. Or, and there's whatever hundreds of thousands of these stories where these transformations happen. Now, you can say, well, like I said, I don't think it really matters. What was the actual cause of that, or what was the ontological truth? Did that happen in what subjective realm? Okay, we can have that debate, but you can't debate the actual results, and that's where I like to focus on, because I think if anybody like you or I starts being like, no, listen, this is it, this is the answer, this you could call my experience or what I did nuts, or say that it's not for you, and I completely understand that. But the proof is in the pudding that I live a happy life now. I'm not an alcoholic. My relationships are fantastic, and I've got now, like I said, my log of stories of people that have shared with me their own experiences, were becoming housebound, suicidal, getting ready to off themselves, and now being, an advocate in the space. That's what I think people, if nothing else, take that away from it. And I would also say that if people are being honest with themselves, you probably have somebody dealing with mental health issues or suicide in your immediate family, not, third, fourth, fifth cousin, but in your immediate inner circle of 10, 15, 20 people. You probably have somebody that's dealing with some mental health or suicide issues or a drug addiction issues. And, you got to be open to other ways of helping them. And I think part of it is, like I said, just not being so judgmental and understanding, hey, you don't need to understand the actual mechanism of how it's happening, but if you can get that person to not be suicide, depressed, or whatever, then that's worth exploring. Or, like I said, at the end of life, to be happy to transition, where instead of now sending them into a hospice, doping them up with morphine and
Opiates
making
and
them dead for the last whatever. Like as opposed to people happy as fuck to be like, yeah, whatever, I'm leaving, I'm going back home. It's there's a lot that should be explored, researched, and talked about. But I have full faith that it is happening, and that there's quite a few voices, and that this conversation is going to have a lot more data points in 5, 10 years from now. And I'd like to think hopefully both of us will still be in the space doing it. But the younger generation too, growing up, seems to be less ignorant, less divisive, less get around hate. Like I mentioned, my niece is 21. I have another one, 15. A lot of my friends have kids that are kind of around that age. Even, you mentioned you had a daughter on one of your podcasts. It's like they're not approaching the world with how can they ruin the planet, how can they monopolize a business, how can they manipulate their friends, and how can they steal. And it's like, no, that's just not in their lexicon. So hopefully, we're gonna phase out some of the nastiness too, just by age.
well, that's pretty much all I have for you, man. That was a fantastic conversation. I'd like to have you back at some point in the future. You said you have
Yeah.
another book coming out. What's that look like, if you don't mind me asking?
So it's about halfway done. So it keeps kind of getting pushed back, but I'd like to say it'll be published by the end of this year. And it's another book in the Butler Field Guide. So it's going to be Butler's Integration Field Guide, and it's going to now be taking some of these lessons and again making it into an easily digestible, not a so what is basic meditation? What is basic breathing? What is basic shadow work without having a, 500 page dissertation on Jung's philosophy, just the
Yeah.
basics of the importance of looking within. Um, so it's going to be, yeah, just another kind of fun, easy field guide, put it in your pocket, pull it out, you read each chapter individually and whatever, put some of these pieces of the puzzle actually together with how you now have a life that's content and happy.
You'd be able to basically maximize the experience of psychedelics with this sort of
Yeah.
further work or whatever.
Because
Excellent.
integration of these lessons, whether it be through psychedelics, through near-death experience, through, like I said, overcoming some sort of tragedy, or now how you integrate them to abrupt the self-destructive paths or habits that you were doing in the past to now, actually have a beneficial effect. And that's kind of the whole point is how do you take back these lessons and integrate them into your life and apply them so where it's not like I don't need to remember every day not to go get a six pack. It's just not even just ingrained now that that's just not what you do. And same thing with you just why would I ever raise my voice and yell at a beautiful woman? Like when would that ever be acceptable? Never. So it's like it's not even in my like book anymore to even possibly do. And those are the things that yeah, I think if we can all just integrate those self-benefiting habits over time, yeah, we'll all be better off.
And I think that our society has done a terrible job of giving people those skills like natively. Like we don't learn that in school. That's not part of what most of us are taught. And so any kind of guide that people can access and learn some of the deeper lessons, philosophical truths that we've learned from people like Jung or whoever else, but in an accessible way that they don't have to, like you said, write a dissertation, but just get the bullet
Yeah.
points that can
Don't run from your
dramatically improve
demons.
people's lives. What's
Yeah.
that?
I said, don't run from your demons.
I
Embrace
think
them,
so.
name them, love them, and then
Yeah. And then they kind of naturally evaporate. That's the beauty of it. Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you.
I appreciate